One of them committed suicide. The other one's still sitting on death row. Leonard Lake, that would have been in the mid-'80s. That happened in Calaveras County in California, up there in Nevada foothills. And he and I want to say his name is Charles Niss, is how he pronounces it. He's like an Asian, of Asian origin. But they got together and they committed murders. They're saying that like 11 counts of capital murder, but they're saying up to 25.
Really?
Yeah, and that
I've
was
never
weird
even heard.
because he was arrested in '85 on illegal weapons, auto theft, and fraud charges. So he swallowed cyanide pills he'd sewn into his clothing. But they, after the fact, found out that he had been responsible for anywhere from 11 to 25 murders along with this guy. So that's the only ones I could think of where there was like an accomplice that went through and did those crimes. They raped, tortured, and murdered. So it was a very similar type of crime to the Rippers. Similar in that aspect.
Interesting. Now, were those guys on the same level, though, or one that was a little stronger than the other one? That's kind of what... I mean, usually one would be stronger, but usually a lot stronger. Like with Richard Loeb and Nathan Leopold in 24. I mean, they both committed the crime, and it was only one crime, one killing. But definitely Richard Loeb was the strongest of the two, and Leopold was kind of a follower. So when these two guys you were talking about, does one seem to be the ringleader, or are they pretty much equal?
Well, one was definitely the ringleader. Leonard Lake was more the ringleader. He invited Charles out there to his cabin, and then they sort of made a... he had already murdered... Leonard Lake had already murdered his brother and his friend and best man at his wedding. He took their identities, and then using these different aliases, they would carry out these crimes. It seems that Leonard Lake was sort of the one that was de facto in charge, and sort of the ringleader, like you said. But it was weird. He was arrested after a gun was equipped with this prohibited silencer in his car, and then he was later identified as, via fingerprints. And while he was in custody, he swallowed those pills. So if he wouldn't have done that, they would have been able to nail him for the murders. But he checked out early. The other guy's still waiting. He got sentenced, I want to say, 11 counts of murder. So he'll probably just die there, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, at least the one guy saved the taxpayers some money, though. I mean, at least
Charles, the accomplice, received 11 convictions, but got 16 charges acquitted due to inadequate evidence, meaning that it might be to the point that Lake had been murdering several more prior to Charles' involvement, but they filmed it. There were videotapes that they found filming the murders, and 40 pounds of burned and crushed human bone fragments, and that's just what's public. Like I said, you could literally. I know I don't often trust sites like Wikipedia, but after going through and verifying some of the facts, it seems to be, if you look at a Wikipedia article on these guys, it seems to be like it's based more in reality than one would think. I mean, even the Chicago Rippers Wikipedia page is, pretty accurate as to what they describe. So it seems like people put time and effort into these pages, so that because you can all cross-reference all day long and go back and look at different sites and stuff. But that's just, I found out about Leonard Lake and Charles Naguin on Wikipedia. Oddly enough, I was looking up a list of people that committed suicide that were notable, and they were a couple of, they were tied together because one was, they were both serial killers, and one of them committed suicide. So.
Wow.
I know.
Well,
Weird
hopefully these three guys that are in custody will commit suicide before they get paroled. Although the one guy won't get. The other guy said 2042 or something possibly when he'd get out, but more than likely he won't make it that long. But yeah, Thomas will be out and about, and I think they went easy on him because he was the first one to crack. He was the weak link, and it's lucky they found him first. So usually you want to find the weak link first if you're gonna interrogate somebody, and they got lucky finding him first, and then he kind of started the ball rolling. But what I can't believe is they actually used the real names when they checked into that hotel. That's kind of what took them down, other than their last victim still being alive. You know, I mean, they weren't really good at what they did. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't get caught sooner. But to leave someone alive after all of that, especially after you had them, you know, in captivity, and to be that sloppy, and they even used their real names when they checked into a hotel in I think it was Villa Park, and then the police went through the hotel registers and found the names, and then went to I always get the Cocorales, Andrew and Tom's house, and Andrew wasn't home.
Well,
and
it's
grabbed
just
Tom.
weird that they threw out 2 victims. They left 2 of their victims alive. One they dumped out of a van. She was taken to the hospital, and then their very last victim, they left her alive as well. I don't know what the point in doing that was. Maybe, I don't know. I wish that I could.
Well, they didn't know they were alive. You know, they could have been passed out, and they just didn't know the difference between a dead person and an unconscious person. Maybe they thought they were dead.
They committed 6 other murders, and were certain. Maybe they just thought, because of the severity of the damage that they did to these women, that they were going to just die from the injuries, or maybe, like you said, they just thought they were dead. But I would think after having committed 6 murders successfully, that one would know what to look for and what not to look for when, looking at a body to determine whether or not it was dead,
Yeah, well, it depends on who was actually doing the dumping. All 4 of them may not have been doing it. It might have been Thomas, and then he just did what they told him to and drove the body out and dumped it without checking.
No, I was thinking, you guys were talking about the left breast. I was doing some, research while I was on the call with you guys, and I didn't come up with anything in Satanist belief. I mean, I've studied some of Anton LaVey's, stuff. I've known about him for several years, but it's kind of a simplistic, really just weird thing. I know with Satanists and some of what people consider Satanists to be, the human sacrifice element, oftentimes what they would sacrifice would be heart or something similar, but the left breast, I guess, would be what would be covering the heart. So maybe in lieu of being able to reach the heart because they didn't think they could do that, they could take the breast, because the breast, I guess, would be a symbol of fertility, much like the vagina, because I know they mutilated a woman's reproductive area really badly with a makeshift cleaver or whatever, and it was so bad that they were picking wood out of it. So I think maybe it has something to do with the fertility, maybe, and also, the heart. Maybe they thought they were going to do the straight-up ritual sacrifice and, extract the human heart, but found themselves incapable of being able to get to it and within the time allotted in order to dump the body and remain safely anonymous. Maybe they just decided to take the breast, because that sounds a lot to me like Jack the Ripper, where he would, mutilate a breast or remove uterus or something like that.
Right.
It's weird.
Obviously,
taken from other killers.
Sure.
I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but originally they were just called the Chicago Ripper. They didn't know it was multiple people, so they were going off the idea that, this is kind of like Jack the Ripper. And then when they figured out it was more than one person, it became the Chicago Ripper Crew or Chicago Rippers, however you want to call it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because you never know how many people are involved initially. Who knows? Jack the Ripper could have been too.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's still an anomaly, though, that a situation like this happened, especially in a big city. They were picking up people more than once. I know a lot of them were street workers or sex workers in broad daylight. I guess it's easier to do that, obviously, when they're offering money. But I got to assume after they figured out that it wasn't just hookers or sex workers that were getting killed, that there had to be at least a little bit of panic in the community there in Chicago. I know it's not widely reported, But in Chicago, I got to assume that there was at least a little bit of terror going on, especially with like the MO, big-breasted women.
Right, and the thing was, there was a lot. Most of them weren't taken from Chicago, though. They're taken from the suburbs, from DuPage County.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Villa Park, Lombard, Elmhurst, Hanover Park. I mean, those were all the towns that I worked with. So, now some of them were found in Chicago, dumped in, depending on where they dumped the body. But I think most of them were taken out of the DuPage area, and that would kind of make sense because Geck lived, just on the north side of Oak Park, and then, of course, I think the Corellises, I believe, were in Villa Park at the time, so it was pretty much their stomping grounds, convenient. It was close to where they were at. But I think most of them weren't necessarily, at least the ones that were found, weren't all prostitutes. I mean, they were kind of from all different.
Sweet Mary definitely wasn't, and her story is her story by itself is enough to bring tears to the eyes. I mean, she's going, she's working in her family's restaurant in the evening. She's working a job during the day. She's riding in the car with her brother. They had an argument, and her brother does the unthinkable and throws her out of the car at 1 o'clock on Hanover Street, and she has to walk. And if she would not have gotten out of that car, there is a part of me that says she might have lived. She might not have been able to had he not gone out of the car. So I don't know how that resonates with them today if my brother's still around, but I don't think I could live with myself. I would be tremendously guilty. I mean, I've argued with people before, but never have I thought about, it would have never crossed my mind to dump someone out in the middle of a busy place like that with all that crime going on, all this terror and horror and people panic and paranoia in the middle of the night and expect her to walk home. It's awful.
Yeah,
the whole awful.
Yeah, you would have to think it'd be the same kind of feeling that the people in New York had with the son Sam, because you just never knew who was going to be next, and it was also very random, and generally couples, sitting in a car would get murdered, but it was, I could imagine it'd be somewhat similar to that, especially when you have the MO of the, woman by themselves, and it was going, taking part, over 2 years basically that all this is going on. So, I can imagine it had to be a pretty scary time, and I agree. I don't know if I would be able to handle it if I was the brother of that girl. Although it would be, from a criminalist standpoint, I think it would be interesting to interview these guys in prison, the 3 guys that are left. I think it might be an interesting conversation that you might want to have with them. They've already been convicted, so they're probably, Geck, I don't know how much you would get out of him. He seems to me like he'd be the tough one, but who knows if you get lucky and mention something, or if you can relate to him at some level, which I know is pretty difficult when you're talking about these sick-minded individuals, but that was part of the whole thing as a cop. When you interviewed someone, you had to find common ground with them in order to get them to open up, which, kind of sick in a way when you're dealing with child murderers or child abusers or, child rapists. That was probably the most difficult part of the job, but I still think it'd be an interesting conversation with these 3 guys that are still locked up.
Well,
Ray,
something else, but I mean, sorry, Travis, I didn't mean to jump into you. I thought there was a dead air there.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, buddy.
No, go ahead. I'll go after you. That's fine.
I was going to say, what he was mentioning just now is something that Ray and I have talked about before, and something I know you've watched. Do you kind of get that from Mindhunter on Netflix whenever they,
Exactly.
try to find that common ground? But I do want to ask you, Ray, I don't think I've ever asked you this, so I think maybe this would be the time since these guys are still alive. If you had a chance in the room, aside from beating them with a stick or something like that, what kind of questions? I mean, because trust me, that's what I would want to do. But I get, the research part of it. What kind of questions would you ask them? Let's put Geck aside, because I'm going to say he's going to be a closed lip, just like you said. He's not going to give a shit. So let's go with the other guys. What type of questions would you try to ask?
Well, I think it'd be. You mean from a researcher standpoint, or if I was interviewing